Hello and welcome back to Killer Score, the podcast that covers cult classic movies with killer soundtracks we feel deserve more attention from different people, and we talk about their composers as well. This time around is going to be Erin's episode, and we have quite a treat for you today. And I would argue this is probably one of, if not the most famous cult classic we're going to cover on here so far, especially in recent memory, and because of the shockingly long shelf life it's had since it graced everyone some years ago.
Yeah.
But starting off like usual, I am your host Daulton Morrison. The conceiver of this project. You can find me on Twitter under my handle SickJacketMan, and you can find me under the YouTube channel of the same name.
Richie Eckert here with Richie's Rad Voices, and you can find my totally amateur voice work on my personal YouTube channel under Richard Eckert, and also some narrative projects that I'm working on, all due to come out soon, I'm sure, this time. Totally not telling myself that. But I've got some content waiting in the wings with me and my friends over at Tantalus. But speaking of the last of the friends that are here...
Hi, the very congested Erin Murray. Sinuses hate me today, but anyway, you can find me at witchandcraftsnj.com. We had to switch the name 6 months ago, but that was a whole mess. Anyway,
always protect your domains, kids.
Always protect your domains and never let crypto bros take your shit. TikTok, Instagram, Witch and Crafts or Witch and Crafts NJ, link in the description. And this week's pick is mine. We are doing the cult classic Halloween film. I would say probably the second most famous cult classic Halloween film.
What's the first one?
Our lost episode, Rocky Horror Picture Show. That's enough screaming, Richie.
Okay, I'm good.
Maybe
I have to be
Halloween 3.
here's a pill, go take it.
Maybe Halloween 3.
Maybe Halloween 3. That's pretty high up there. And
Yeah.
Nightmare on Elm Street 2.
Yeah.
But this is one of, I would say, as of merchandising,
Oh yeah.
this is definitely the most marketable, if that's the right word.
Yeah.
Cult classic Halloween film. So we're doing...
Because let's face it, the franchises that have longevity or have stayed in the cultural mind have a figurehead that is nailed into people's minds that just is an iconic image. You know, your Leatherfaces, your Michaels, your Freddys, your Jasons, your Pinheads.
Yeah.
And today is certainly not an exception to that rule.
Yes, today we are doing the 2007 Michael Dougherty film, Trick or Treat. Sorry, I'm gonna say it like that every time.
Alright, putting aside the source of my new nightmares for the week,
Welcome.
this is one of the few Halloween cult classic films that I myself am not privy to. I've heard about this movie several times. I've seen promotions for it. I've heard these two gush about it so many times.
It's so good.
And I've had multiple friends outside of the podcast tell me how much this is right up my alley. I just never got around to seeing it simply due to time constraints.
Yeah.
Big world of cinema out there, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Not only that, but I also say that the other reason that a lot of people haven't seen this movie is because it never really got a theatrical release.
No, it didn't.
It got screened at a few festivals. It got a limited release in a couple theaters. But everything else was all home video.
Yeah, it was one of the last movies I can think of, pre the big streaming boom. Because keep in mind, like she said, 2007. people were still like going to blockbusters still, and you know, Netflix was still in its infancy,
Yeah.
and that was, well, not even its infancy, because Netflix had actually been around for a while at that point still.
But they were just doing DVDs by mail.
Yeah, and that's how we watched it. We did it through I first watched it was through the DVD Netflix rental thing. I saw some trailers and heard some hype about it, and it was like, okay, let's check this out, and it was awesome. And ever since then, I've loved the film, and it's like just built up more and more of a following over the years.
Oh yeah, I mean, just look at any Spirit Halloween merchandise. You're gonna see Sam somewhere.
Yeah, or any place around Halloween, you'll probably see at least one trick-or-treat piece of merch, and it'll almost always be something involving Sam, maybe the ghost kids and some other stuff, you know.
Yeah.
But this film is kind of one of those things that probably would have been a huge success, but it just kind of got buried because it was actually planned to have
A
theatrical release, and then at the last minute they just negged on it and went, nah.
That's weird. Well, how often does that happen, really?
Not too often. Usually they either decide they're not going to release it a long time ahead of time, or they work out some sort of other deal. As far as I could tell from like a lot of stuff I've read, it was one of those things where, like, you know, everyone loved making it, the production went good, you know, like the film looked great, everything was good. The test screenings were all positive, and they just didn't release it in theaters for some reason.
Huh. But yeah, like I said before, this seems like it'd be right up my alley because I am a documented lover of horror anthology in media. Because my yearly tradition for Halloween is Creepshow.
Mm-hmm.
And if there's anything Daulton has learned about me over the last several years and back during my blog days, I love Tales from the Crypt.
Yeah, and this one's kind of interesting because unlike most anthologies where it's like mostly a looser connective tissue that usually has like one framing device.
Or a bookend.
Yeah. This is an anthology that's basically where everything is kind of loosely connected, even in like minor ways.
Yeah, because the character of Sam shows up in almost basically every.
He shows up in every story.
In every story throughout this film. And if you don't know this, the character of Sam is the spirit of Halloween, like a personification of Halloween itself.
Mm-hmm.
And he's actually played by a child actor who was about 7 or 8 years old when they did this movie.
Yeah, who's actually going on to become a very successful actor in his own
Yeah,
right.
Quinn Lord is his name. What else? The film is set in the town of Warren Valley, Ohio, which is not an actual place, but it's based off a lot of places in the U.S., like small towns that have big Halloween festivals, because there are a lot of small towns that have like Halloween parades are basically a big thing in small town U.S., and Canada too, from what I've heard. But the movie was actually filmed in Vancouver, which was kind of interesting because you would not guess that from looking at the movie. What else have we not talked about? Oh yeah, there's another horror film called Trick or Treat that was released in the 80s. It was like a slasher film, I think.
Yeah, it was like a rocker slasher kind of thing.
Yeah, they had the
Is that the one with Gene Simmons in it?
To Google, you keep fluffing this.
Okay.
That was I'm pretty sure that was one that had an actual famous rock star in it. I believe it was Gene Simmons. It might have been Alice Cooper, but either way, yeah, this one's kind of interesting too because
No, you're right. Gene Simmons.
Oh, it was the one with Gene
It
Simmons.
was Gene Simmons.
Yeah. So yeah.
It's trick or treat, though, not trick or treat, like here.
Yeah.
Yeah, they had to apostrophize the R in it so it wouldn't get confused and so they wouldn't get copyright problems and all that mess.
Yeah. So this one was pretty interesting, like I said. And unlike most anthologies, it's all set in the same location and over the course of one night. And just like films like Pulp Fiction, for example, where it's told sort of anachronistically, where
Out of order.
Yeah,
Yeah.
if you like pay attention to like key events in the film and like the background, you can actually like sort of piece together on like rewatches when certain events take place. Like the very first, like it's very clear even on first watch. The first segment, the opener kind of that you see is like at the very end of the story.
Yeah.
But and like everything else is kind of out of order. But if you work it out, you can tell out the order that it went in. And yeah, this film has quite the legacy.
Yes. As we've mentioned, basically every Halloween store has some kind of Sam merchandise in it. That's how the legacy this film has made.
I cannot avoid the little bastard. I remember having a very brief, miserable tenure at Spirit Halloween.
Oh, jeez.
It was...
Shout outs to Spirit, same here.
I couldn't work there because I'm allergic to latex.
Man, that would have been a nightmare.
Yeah.
But chances are, if you bumped into something, it was one of two things. One, a clown costume. Two, some sort of Sam-related piece of merchandise.
Oh, yeah. I mean, we had a Sam blow-up for our Halloween decorations for a couple years.
Yeah, it just happened to break, unfortunately.
Yeah, it just broke
That's
last
pretty cool,
year.
though.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
the pump kind of went out on it.
Yeah, and there's also like a tear in the fabric or something
Yeah,
that will
so
look
it
dumb
wasn't
if we put
pumping
duct
up.
tape on it.
Yeah, so.
But back to the movie. So, Mike Dougherty wanted to create a film that was similar to, like, basically a Halloween version of A Christmas Carol, is what he was going for. And you kind of see that in his other films, because Mike Dougherty was also the same person who went on to make Krampus. Same director.
Great movie.
Oh, yeah. And he also worked with the composer of this film with Krampus, Douglas Pipes, who has done several. Let me bring it up. He's done some other horror films, but they've mostly been smaller ones. Let me bring it up. Douglas Pipes. Here we are. He's most well known for doing Trick or Treat and Krampus, as well as Monster House. He's done a lot of Halloween and horror movies.
Monster House is another great one.
I didn't care for that movie, to be honest.
Yeah,
I mean, I watched it in like the 8th grade. I was like, this is kind of... what?
Underrated, I thought.
Anyway. He also went on to do some...
Don't worry, she'll live after this.
He went on to do, besides Krampus, he also did a movie called The Babysitter, which was like a horror comedy that came out in 2017.
Yeah, I've seen clips.
And before that, he had a really weird assortment. Well, before and after, a weird assortment of movies that he did. Anything ranging from City of Ember and Monster House to Moonstalker, and a Barbie movie.
All right then.
Huh.
Yeah, it's a really weird assortment of his compositions.
So a tenured film composer from the sounds of it.
Yeah. What else was I going to say? Mike Dougherty wanted to make a Halloween mascot in the same way that we have like the Easter Bunny or Santa.
Yeah.
But what he did is he basically achieved that at this point.
Yeah, honestly.
Because Sam himself is a personification of the spirit of Halloween.
Yeah.
And now you see Sam's stuff everywhere.
Oh, yeah.
Like I said, inescapable. Go to a Halloween store somewhere in your neck of the woods, and you're likely to find that little burlap sack fella just standing there.
Yeah.
Just hanging out, you know.
So, should we read the synopsis before we get into the screening?
Of course. Mind if I do it since I'm the uninitiated?
Sure. Go ahead.
Of course.
The best horror anthology in years, according to Fangoria.com. A creepy, darkly comic celebration of the scariest night of the year from producer Bryan Singer, director of X-Men and Superman Returns, and writer-director Michael Dougherty. I'm doing well already. Co-scriptwriter of X2 and Superman Returns. Trick or Treat takes the Creepshow Tales from the Crypt approach to nefarious new depths, with 4 interwoven tales set on Halloween night. A high school principal, played by Dylan Baker, moonlights as a vicious serial killer. The quest of a young virgin, played by Anna Paquin, for that special someone takes a gruesome turn. A group of teens carries out a cruel prank with disastrous consequences. And a cantankerous old man, Brian Cox, battles with a mischievous trick-or-treating demon. Cool stuff.
Oh, yeah.
And already this movie seems like it's teasing me with how much it's playing to my sensibilities by name-dropping the movie and the show I just referenced.
Yeah. And another thing I want to mention is that, of course, there's some actors you'll recognize, like
Brian
Anna
Cox.
Paquin, Brian Cox. Also, Britt McKillop, which, if you watch My Little Pony, she's
Yeah.
Princess Cadence.
Yep. A
Yeah,
whole bunch of other characters too.
yeah, a lot of
Oh, yeah.
Canadian actors.
Well, the film was made in Canada.
Yeah.
And they had a lot of Canadian actors playing American. Well, basically everyone's playing Americans because it's in Ohio.
Yeah.
And just one last thing before we get into this. The character of Sam was originally introduced in a short film he did in the 90s called Season's Greetings.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, that Mike Dougherty did. So, basically it's the same character, just different film and a short film. But I think it's time we get into this. What do you guys think?
Yep.
I concur.
Let's go.
Trick or treat. And we're back. We just finished watching 2007's Trick or Treat, and this is one of my favorite Halloween movies. It's almost become a Halloween tradition for Daulton and I.
Yeah.
And I want to know, what do you two think? Especially you, Richie, or we can go with Daulton first.
Yeah, let's build it up.
Okay.
So, I've seen this quite a few times. It's probably like 5th or 6th time I've seen it. And yeah, no, still great. When people talk about this film, I know we talk about, like, they talk about the segments and the costume design and stuff, but I feel like the score and cinematography don't get talked about enough in this movie. Like, the score feels very appropriately, like,
Halloween-y?
spooky, creepy Halloween-y music, but it's, like, sufficiently actually eerie when it needs to be,
Oh, yeah.
atmospheric when it needs to be. And when it comes to cinematography and editing, this film is like a master of the match cuts. There's so many fantastic match cuts that I can think of in this movie, and I'm not even going to say them just because I don't want to spoil any of them. I want people to be surprised by them themselves and stuff, you know.
We have timestamps.
Yeah, well, I don't even know if I'll even want to talk about them in there just because, like, I can't sell them justice without people seeing it, you know. Nope, still as good as all the other times I've seen it. The film is like 4 different segments, but they're all kind of, it's not like Creepshow where it's like a hard distinctive cut with title
With all
cards and stuff.
It's more like a horror Halloween themed Pulp Fiction, as we said
Yes.
earlier.
Yeah, because it's all taking place over the court, like with the
Like
exception of flashbacks. It's
like if Tarantino made a horror anthology movie himself.
yeah, because with the exception of like flashbacks, everything takes place during one night. And it's all like interwoven. But yeah, no, still love this movie. It's still awesome. Quinn Lord has great body acting as Sam, of course. Anna Paquin's great. Everyone's just great in this movie.
Where has this movie been for the last few Halloweens? Why was I so stupid to take this long, guys? I really like this movie. Thank you guys for introducing me to it. And don't you worry, Daulton, we are not done gushing about the cinematography
Oh, of
by a
course not.
long
Yeah.
shot. It will get its love, as will the impeccable score that mixes John Carpenter motifs with a bit of Danny Elfman, with just every great bit of scary music that you could ever imagine is here.
I say this in the nicest way possible. This movie feels like if you had one of those, like, haunted spooky sound CDs as your film soundtrack.
In the best way.
In the best way.
Possible.
The acting's great. I love Brian Cox. I love the guy who plays the principal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Stephen Colbert's doppelganger, as I call him.
Yeah, he's great. I feel like I've seen him in some other films as well.
Anna Paquin's great.
Dylan Baker.
Dylan Baker, yep. He's amazing. And I have a feeling that a discussion of all the segments is in order under spoilers, but...
Oh, duh. That's where people would know him from. Some of you probably would know Dylan Baker from the Raimi Spider-Man films where he played Dr. Curtis Connors.
Oh, yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. Very good in those films, too.
Yeah, it was great.
Excellent mentor figure to Peter.
Oh yeah.
But, again, this is... It is your quintessential horror anthology movie, like I said, but... I think my favorite part about this is how it, as Daulton says, how it distinguishes itself from other anthologies by virtue of not making the individual segments episodic.
Mm-hmm.
They're all kind of woven together like a cinematic quilt.
Yeah, and some are more connected in other ways, and what ways we won't get into, you know.
Yeah. But it's very smooth, and I can't really do it justice by even describing it because there's so much precision and subtlety that goes into sewing all of those together.
Yeah, and it's kind of like a, forgive me for this one, but I had to, it's sort of a cinematic monster mash. Because of like all the Halloween things you could think of, you know, you got like spooky spirits, you got you know you're like
Vampires.
Vampires, werewolves, zombies, killer, like, you know, like killer things in general, serial killers. Yeah,
it's doing the sort of thing that the more recent Resident Evil games have really played into. And I appreciate it for that kind of tone.
Yeah.
Like, it's just self-aware enough. Mm-hmm. This isn't full-on Evil Dead 2 territory. No. It's not a pure comedy, but there are...
But it's a very funny movie.
Naturally so.
Yeah.
One that... pitch black comedy.
Oh, absolutely.
But, there's just so much I love about this. That spoiler tag is probably going to take up so much time.
Oh, probably, yeah.
Yeah, so there's basically like 4 segments in this movie. One revolving around some young teenagers who are trick-or-treating, who have like a special trip to a haunted local area planned for Halloween. It's one of those films that like combines so much of actual Halloween traditions and ideas of like even things you do in your kids or like stories you pass around. So you got one revolving around a like, you know, the local school principal and the crazy Halloween night he has. You've got one involving around the next door neighbor who's a cranky old man and
played wonderfully by the ever underrated Brian Cox.
Absolutely so. The aforementioned teenagers and some young adults who are out on the town looking for cute boys for Halloween. And, you know, they're all sort of interconnected, and while these stories are all their own thing, they're all tied together in a way that it's basically impossible to rip one out without completely destroying the cohesion.
Smoothly, too. Like I said, the most impressive thing to me is the finesse with which they're all woven together, because typical anthologies are structured much like Creepshow,
mm-hmm.
where there's a framing device, segment, bookend, segment, bookend, back to the framing device towards the very end. But this takes a novel approach, which I don't see anyone else doing well again.
Yeah, because it interweaves all the anthology stories, all the plots together in a way that you don't see as often especially in horror movies.
Yeah, I can only imagine how sometimes this was probably just a continuity and editing nightmare to manage.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
It takes a lot of finesse, and once you the budget's well spent, but once you see that the budget is $12 million, which for
What?
yeah, for a horror movie of this era and this scale, that kind of makes sense that the budget was $12 million.
Yeah.
That's still when you put it against other movies. Seriously.
No, yeah, but that for a horror film, especially by a newer director at the time, that's a pretty big budget.
Yeah.
And also I wanted to mention, sorry, as I mentioned earlier, I'm very congested. Some of the stories intertwine with the rules of Halloween.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah, because we learn from Mr. Wilkins, always check your candy. Never blow a jack-o'-lantern. That's the first story. What is that face for?
I'm sorry. The imagery.
Oh, okay.
The
Richie
imagery.
made a face of just horror and disgust, and I was like, what's going on?
I'm remembering the imagery that accompanied the first role.
Oh, yeah. Wear a costume and hand out treats, which is Mr. Krieg's story.
Yeah, and let us not forget, things are never as they seem.
Oh, it's Halloween. Of course, nothing is ever as it seems on Halloween.
And, there's even some great foreshadowing about when they mention, the Charlie Brown Halloween Great Pumpkin.
Yeah.
Because, that there's literally in that, in the Charlie Brown Halloween special, they say, wear a costume that's the opposite of your personality,
Yeah.
I like how the kid's like, Charlie Brown's an asshole.
Yeah. That little kid, he's so good in this film.
We love Billy.
He's a little show stealer.
Yeah, he's the perfect little shithead, like a precocious
Precocious.
shithead.
Little shit.
Which, that's a fine, delicate line to walk across, but he nails it.
I
I
didn't.
want to see who played that kid, who played Billy.
Oh,
Yeah,
he's
let's
so
see.
good.
But yeah, point is, there on one hand you have the kids from Jurassic Park, and then on the other hand you have really annoying examples. But this kid falls into the former category. He's just a joy. He's endearingly annoying.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it looks like he's mostly a lot of his roles were just as a child actor
Oh, okay.
for TV commercials and movies. The most recent thing I can find is 2011.
Yeah, but he's great in this.
Oh wait, 2013, where he was in it looks like a Hallmark movie or something.
Oh, okay. But yeah, he's great in this. I absolutely, there's some other great actors in there. Another seasonal cult classic film actor. One of the kids in the movie is the same kid from Bad Santa.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
It took me a second too. Dalton's like, you've seen this kid. And he was giving me the grin you guess. I'm like, I fucking hate you.
Yeah, you just did not get it. But this one is so good. Dougherty, there's a reason he went on to helm bigger projects. We forgot to mention it earlier, but he went on to direct the second film in the Godzilla trilogy, Godzilla,
King of the Monsters.
King of the Monsters of the Legendary Pictures trilogy. And I know he was involved with Godzilla vs. Kong. I think he wrote the script at least. I can't remember if he directed it or not.
To Wikipedia.
But
for the
he
fifth time.
definitely was involved with those. And of course he did Krampus, which also really good. I think I still prefer Trick or Treat to Krampus, but
yeah, I do too.
they're both really good. It's not one of those films I go out of my way to watch every Christmas time when I watch a Christmas horror film. I still prefer Black Christmas, for example.
Yeah, he was a writer on Godzilla vs. Kong.
And he directed
King of the
King of
Monsters.
the Monsters.
which best one of the MonsterVerse Godzilla picks.
Yeah. Godzilla vs. Kong is numero dos on that list for me. That it was pretty good, but King of the Monsters is the best sort of kitchen sink movie.
It is.
And I cannot wait to see more of Mothra in the Monsterverse.
Yeah, they're planning more with that, but when it comes to films, we're just going to have to see what Toho themselves are putting out next, because after Godzilla vs. Kong ended, they literally, wrote a clause out with, I think it's Legendary who distributes the Monsterverse picture.
Yeah, Legendary.
Yeah, Legendary, they made a deal with them, and they were like, hey, listen, you can't touch Godzilla himself for a few years because we need to work on another film, because they sort of did a deal where Toho wouldn't release Godzilla films for a certain period. Yeah,
give it a couple years and anticipation will be through the roof. If ever there were a time to take a break, Kong would be it. You've peaked for a bit.
Yeah.
Yes.
and honestly, I'm more curious to see what Toho is going to put out for Godzilla next, especially when the last thing they put out was Shin Godzilla. So now you wonder what they're going to do next. It's are they going to do a continuation of Shin? There was implications there might be a sequel. Are they going to do something else? Who knows? I'm very curious.
Yeah.
Anyway, Trick or Treat.
Anyway, back to Trick or Treat.
So, I'll pass it off back to you again since this is your episode.
Yes, so, this isn't really spoiler much. Actually, it wasn't really at all. It's a horror movie. There's gonna be some blood in it. But an interesting thing about the blood that they use in the movie, I mentioned this when we were screening, is they used a mix of red food dye and chocolate syrup with a little bit of mint flavoring, so it actually tasted really good.
Oh, I can never have chocolate milk ever again.
But it was actually really funny because the actors were just yeah, we have to get this all over our clothes and stuff, but it smells and tastes like an ice cream parlor in here.
I can only imagine what that set was like.
Very sticky, I assume. They also, for scenes where which I don't know if you guys noticed, there are some scenes where the blood is steaming. They actually had to keep, it in a pot or some kind of cooker or something like that to keep it warm for the scenes.
Oh my god.
Which I just thought was really cool.
Speaking of which, we got to talk about the effects in general.
Effects are incredible.
Yeah, they are. There didn't seem to be much in the way of CGI, so a lot of it, actually all of it, I think, is practical effects. And the majority is practical effects, and they are all beautiful. From the monster effects to the gore to the set pieces. There's one room that we're certain must have had the crew busting their asses trying to get set up. Well, we won't say which one until later, but it looks gorgeous. I love this movie's aesthetic. It has a very late 80s horror aesthetic.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. And we already mentioned how much we love the cinematography and the match cuts in this movie. We talked about the score a bit. How it's I don't want to use the term hauntingly beautiful, because I feel like that term gets overused a lot. But it's creepy in a way that works really well. See, the screenwriters and the director, they wanted to make a film that was both kind of had a childlike sense of horror and wonder to it.
You can see that.
You can see that throughout the film.
I had a classmate back in middle school who wrote all sorts of scary stories, and she and I would try and one-up each other with how weird and stuff they got, and this movie very much channels that same kind of spirit where it is spooky, but in a way that feels like it was partially written by a kid just discovering old horror movies.
Yeah.
But that's not an insult. It's all part of the charm.
And the plan. This is literally what they were going for. And another thing I want to mention is the comic book intro and outro that they used to the film. So they actually they're actually they're kickstarting an actual comic book for Trick or Treat.
Yeah, there was an actual comic book for Trick or Treat before. The crowdfunding is not only to re-release it, but re-release it in a nice hardcover format with an additional story
Yeah.
that was
trade.
that was conceived for either another. It was like an idea of like a potential extra segment in the original Trick or Treat that they kind of cut out the film.
Yeah.
So, if you want to see what more Trick or Treat would look like, it would be a good idea to try to find that crowdfunding right now and fund it.
I'll try and see if I can link it.
Yeah.
Yes,
in our
please
stuff.
do.
Yeah, please do.
Yeah, let's do that.
Yeah.
I'll link it when I post this.
And interestingly enough, for years now, there's been like rumors of a potential sequel to Trick or Treat. And it keeps getting more likely with each passing year, Dougherty basically is saying.
It is, because if you look up Trick or Treat 2, it says it's in development. That's what it says, but that also doesn't always mean something, because it could also be in development hell.
Never accept anything until it says pre-production.
Yeah, basically.
Yeah. But I have a feeling it would still work if it came out, because, again, this director has had a lot of awesome higher profile productions under his belt, and I'd love to see what he does with even more of a budget the second time around.
Oh, absolutely. What else can we say until we get into spoiler territory?
There was something I was going to say. Give me a sec. Oh,
I did have something I wanted to say.
I saw it. The second you did that gasp, I'm like, oh, she's gonna bring it home. She's gonna bring it in.
If you are going to be at Monster Mania this year, expect some a Monster Mania 52 in Oaks, PA from November 11th to the 13th. Expect some handmade trick-or-treat Sams.
come, sit, buy our merch, and chat with us, because we all like meeting new friends.
Yes. Sorry, that was my product plug for the episode.
Yeah,
Continue.
and if you meet us and you got any ideas for episodes or merch at the table, hit us up.
Yeah,
Yeah.
throw them out to us.
Yeah.
We love chatting.
Heck, post them in the comments below.
Yeah. And in the words of Erin Mankey, say hi. I like it when people say hi.
Yeah, something I was gonna say about the effects was just how much it seems like kind of a grab bag of old movies in the best of ways. Like, the werewolf effects reminded me so much of The Howling and of American Werewolf in London. What else is there to say about Sam except the little boy is iconic? He has such a great design, and the way...
He is the moment.
Yeah, he is.
He is what puts this movie together.
Yes.
Because for someone of that stature and the way that Quinn Lord acts out, Sam, you needed a child actor for that. Because you needed someone who has that kind of body movement, and also the way that, like, childlike sense of, as we said, wonder and horror.
His little gangly run
Which is actually kind of cute.
Yeah, he does.
Look at him running.
Yeah, he runs like a kid.
Yeah, because he was like 7.
Yeah, his feet kick up and his arms are swaying back and forth because, he's a little trick-or-treater.
Yeah. And speaking of that, I think it's time we get into spoiler territory.
Time stamping.
Timestamp at... I can't read
39.
that. 39. Okay, good. I have contacts in, but I need a new prescription, so I can't see that from here.
Hey, it was the technical guy here. I got this.
You got it. Okay, so... A little...
Point by point, we gotta go with the segments.
Segments. Okay, so the first segment of the film is these...
Oh, give me a sec. They actually have names.
Oh, yeah, they do have names.
You just have to look at the supplemental material to look at them. But
Yeah, because they don't have cards.
They don't have title cards. So our first segment is the principal.
The principal, which is Principal Stephen Wilkins. He's a serial killer. and it seems like he tends to work on Halloween.
Yeah.
That's what's implied with the movie. He sees there's a kid who's breaking pumpkins and just causing mayhem.
Kid.
Just a shit little kid. Well, not little kid. He's probably like 13.
Played by the bad Santa kid.
Played by the bad Santa kid. Who
Connor, that's not Connor. Brett Kelly.
Brett Kelly. He goes to the Mr. Wilkins' door and starts stealing handfuls of candy from the candy bowl on the porch. And then Mr. Wilkins catches him, and he just like starts talking to him, and then he starts eating one of the candy bars, and he starts spewing everywhere, which was like the grossest thing, but also kind of satisfying in the way that it was like this kid's getting his comeuppance for being a shithead.
Yeah, it's a mixture. It's literally a mixture of blood and chocolate.
Blood, chocolate syrup, and mint flavoring so it could smell better.
I mean, in universe, it's blood and chocolate.
Yeah.
I can never have chocolate again.
It's funny, I was gonna bring chocolate bars to this.
No!
Yes, please. I'm just not allowed to eat chocolate in Dalton's car because I make a mess every time. Like a child. I'm an overgrown child.
No shit!
Shut up! Oh, sorry, that was a spike. And he kills basically the kid starts throwing up till he dies. Or almost dies.
Much like me after this segment.
And Mr. Wilkins goes out into his backyard to dispose of the body, but his son keeps interrupting him. And another body, because you see like a kid in a costume.
Yeah, because there's like specifically, like there was no problem killing Charlie.
No.
But apparently some kid he attempted to kill earlier because you see like an arm in a like clown costume. Yeah, and it's just the most dark comedy as he's trying to have a conversation with Mr. Krieg, his next door neighbor, while like
the Brian Cox guy.
While trying to just kill this still slightly alive child.
You just hear his whimpers and the thunk of the shovel
as he's just stomping and kicking the shit out of him.
It's kind of like when your cat brings in like a half-dead mouse or something, and you're like, what the fuck do I do with this?
Yeah, it's just perfect pitch dark comedy. The next door neighbor's dog's trying to get into it. He literally just breaks a kid's finger off and is like, here, go get it. Throws it after the dog,
Throws it in the neighbor's yard.
Yeah.
And all this... his son Billy is like screaming from the window.
Just talking with
him,
just
trying to talk, get him to
do stuff.
Yeah, can I go to the play with you later? When are we gonna carve a jack-o'-lantern? Just typical little kid stuff.
Which, once he finally gets rid of that kid who's struggling, he walks back up to the porch and he has the single best line in the movie, like, Dad, I want to carve a pumpkin. Dad, I want to
go to the parade.
Hey, Daddy, I wish Mom were alive.
Yeah.
Which also could have implied
that he killed the mom.
And then, it's not done after that either, though, because he goes in to greet his kid, and
he's been complaining. The son's been pissing him off. He's got a knife.
Like, can you help me with the eyes?
And then the movie replicates the knife behind the back shot from The Stepfather.
Yeah, and he's got the blood on his shirt, and you keep thinking, okay, yeah, he's
that kid's dead.
He's dead. He's dead. He's gonna kill the kid, and then no, the kid knows he's a serial killer.
Yeah, and
he looks up to his dad because he dresses up as his dad for Halloween,
which is kind of sad once you get into it in multiple ways. But I digress.
So, the moment they go down into the basement to quote carve a pumpkin,
it's Charlie's head.
Yeah, it's Charlie's head, and before they cut to it, but they make it look like the dad's gonna stab the son. But I knew before the knife hit the flesh, I turned to Daulton and Erin. I'm like, for real? No way! And I'm like, and then it cuts over, and they're both staring admiringly at the work of art. I'm like, I knew it. kids.
And it's great because there is some, like, little foreshadowing that the son knows that his dad's a serial killer.
So beautifully.
He doesn't ask any questions.
Yeah, like his dad's openly digging what is clearly a grave in the backyard.
And then when you go through the kitchen, all of the poisoned candies
Just
lying
laying out with
around.
syringes and stuff.
Like, there's literally, like, potassium cyanide, arsenic, just on the kitchen counter.
Yeah.
Real blink and you'll miss it kind of
Yeah.
stuff.
Yeah, so it was implied. That is the first segment. It's a great warm-up, You're still kind of grounded in the realms of reality, serial killer stuff.
Dylan Baker's great, and you want to punch him so much, but he's so charming.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and like, you're almost like, oh, the connection with his son's kind of sweet. And then we get into, I would argue, along with the final segment, is the most iconic segment in the film, the Halloween School Bus Massacre,
Oh, that one's my favorite.
Same.
Bar none.
also known as Halloween School Bus Massacre Revisited, because of the fact that they're visiting the site of where the massacre happened.
Yeah. I love this one.
So much.
The kid actors are great in it, and
It feels like it feels real because it that it feels like an actual like urban legend that like you would hear as like a kid.
yeah, and the kids have the same kind of energy, albeit in a darker way, that the kids from, say, the Goonies or the Monster Squad have.
Yeah, they have
Yeah.
that same reverence towards the dark story that
Yeah.
most
yeah.
kids would.
And going into this, Erin had warned me that there was a wee bit of ableism going on in how the kids treat the clearly neurologically atypical Rhonda.
Yeah, but it's intentional.
Intentional, because Rhonda is such a great, sympathetic character that you just want to give a hug.
And she's clearly supposed to be a parallel to the actual story of the massacre, because it's very clear. It's very clear. It's actually been heavily speculated by fans that most of those kids on the bus weren't probably like severely challenged kids.
Yeah.
It's heavily hinted that most of them might have just been, kids who were like,
Had disabilities or something.
On
just
the
on the
spectrum.
on the spectrum, yeah. Like the kid in the kid in the vampire mask. I always like just had a feeling he was like highly neurotypical,
I've had classmates back in like the first grade.
Yeah.
Because I shared.
Neurotypical. Sorry.
Yeah.
But-
I shared classes with other people on the spectrum, and I've had classmates who are very much like Rhonda.
Mm-hmm. And the reason I bring that up too is the vampire kid is clearly smart. Like he's counting all the house numbers when they're driving past.
Yeah.
He's like 3,260, 3,262. Like, and then when the bus driver goes to turn, he just keeps saying wrong way.
Yeah.
Like he knows something's wrong, unlike the rest of the classmates.
Hyper focused.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I just found out too when I was reading up some more trivia, they actually specifically cast kids who actually did have disabilities
Oh,
and who were like had like physical injuries. For
that's
that.
awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, because they wanted it to feel real.
Also, point number 3,782 of how Sia can eat my ass. I'm sorry. I had to get that in there.
Understandable.
Hire autistic actors.
Yeah,
I don't care
and
that I peaked it.
it's one of the finest segments in the movie because it's so sympathetic and it feels so real because of like how awfully people were treated, even more so back then, who had like,
Because they said this was about 30 years ago, so it would have been about the mid 70s.
yeah, which checks. That
Yeah.
checks.
Yes. And Rhonda is so endearing because, she's the real bookish, introverted kid who made her own costume,
Just loves Halloween.
loves Halloween, has the trivia listed off like how I would do stuff like that as a kid. It's very true to form, in case you couldn't tell, and I really appreciated it.
Reminds me almost of
Me as a child.
I wouldn't know.
Yeah.
No, I was going to say it kind of reminds me of tying it into another one of my favorite things. It reminds me of York from Deadly Premonition.
Yeah.
How like just the slightest thing will set York off into a tirade about film trivia.
Yeah.
Just like listing it off encyclopedically. Oh, no, Jaws, released in 1985, directed by Steven Spielberg. You know, Jaws appeared in another non-Jaws film that was produced by Spielberg. Do you know what that was, Zach? That's right, Back to the Future Part 2.
But yeah, the kids take her to that haunted spot with the intention of scaring the shit out of her because it's an easy thing to do for people who are overstimulated like her.
Mm-hmm. It's a Scooby-Doo prank.
It's a Scooby-Doo prank, and it's played out so realistically because they basically bring her to the point of having a meltdown.
Yeah.
And it's not until one of the other kids grows a conscience that things cool down, and oh boy, the karma.
The karmic retribution.
Yeah, so this segment is the one with the revenant zombies.
Of those kids.
There's like a running theme of this movie how jack-o'-lanterns are a symbol of protection, so you shouldn't blow them out. And every time someone blows out a jack-o'-lantern in this movie, something bad happens. Case in point, all the jack-o'-lanterns brought down into the quarry, once the last one gets blown out, the zombies come back.
Yep. And also, in the scene at the very beginning, where the husband and wife, the wife blows out the candle on the jack-o'-lantern, and she, like, immediately gets murdered. And also the other scenes, like when the kids breaking the jack-o'-lanterns, just knocking them onto the street. Charlie, he gets killed. It's like you see the continuity here.
Although technically the first thing you do see in the movie was a little bit that was actually made for the trailer.
Oh, what's that?
The little, like, here's your rules of Halloween safety. Like the old educational style film segment.
One of those film strip segments. Film reel segments that you'd see in theaters back in the day.
Yeah, well, it looked more like one of those classroom ones you would see.
Oh, yeah.
Like they show on, like...
all the McCarthy stuff.
Mm-hmm. Or, like, they would show on, like, Billy and Mandy to show how old and outdated the school is and stuff.
Yeah.
Has the same kind of energy, to be honest. Speaking of Halloween stuff and Halloween cartoons, Britt McKillop was also Hannah in the Scary Godmother movies.
So she's actually connected to two cult classic Halloween stuff.
Those are cute, by the way. They're janky and the animation hasn't aged well, but they're cute. And
even when I was a kid, I was like, "What is this animation?"
Me too. But they're cute. It's got a very cheeky tone that I appreciate.
Yeah. So, karmic comeuppance. There's this whole thread about how, like, the lift they take down can only carry 3 people. And I was realizing this on rewatch this time. They say for Rhonda to let them in so the zombie kids can't get them. But here's the thing. There were 3 of them out there.
Yeah. So there's nothing...
She'd already been screwed over and lied to by them. So in my head, the reason she actually screwed them all over is because she thought they were going to throw her out of the lift.
Yeah. She kind of subconsciously planned it, and it's brilliant, especially when she gets out of the lift, comes back up topside.
And you just hear their screams, which is chilling too. Yeah.
It's great. They're echoed screams, and then who's up there but Sam?
He's just chilling.
Chilling up there.
And they just exchange a passing glance. Like they recognize each other almost.
Yeah.
And it's like he's kind of giving her a knowing glance like, yep, good job.
Yeah, and there's also implications that Rhonda herself might be a witch.
Yeah, there are some fan theories that Rhonda is either a witch or Rhonda is already like friends with Sam,
Mm-hmm.
and that's why they like exchange that glance with each other, like knowingly knowing who they are.
Yeah, because it's heavily implied throughout the film that Sam can only be seen by people he chooses to be seen by.
Yeah.
If I can have a very brief soapbox moment to all of y'all who are greeting trick-or-treaters out on your streets, be nice to neurologically atypical kids out there. They can have a hard time out there on the streets, so be nice to them, give them lots of candy, and give them warm smiles. They deserve them.
Mm-hmm. Always compliment someone's costume, too.
Oh, of course, too. Like, not saying that they're all doomed to have bad experiences, but you can always make their nights better. And,
You don't lose anything by just saying one nice thing to someone a day, you know?
yeah, especially if they're on the spectrum.
Or even just a little kid, you know?
Exactly. Yeah, be nice to kids.
Halloween can be a scary time or stressful for young kids, you know?
Especially if you're in my neck of the woods.
So, yeah, and then after Halloween School Bus Massacre Revisited, or just Halloween School Bus Massacre, we are on to probably the biggest, I would argue, twist segment, Surprise Party.
Yeah.
This one's been building up throughout the entire film, too.
Good little piece of interweaving, too, that goes on. Because that's when some of the pieces from other segments come together.
And there's a bunch of great foreshadowing in this segment at the very beginning of it, too. Especially on rewatch. Richie, I know you probably had trouble hearing it. But when they're talking about picking up boys, you can... the implication, of course, is that they were actually talking about eating and murdering them. Specifically, I had some, I had Mexican and it disagreed with my stomach last year. Yeah.
That, in hindsight, that changes everything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you got this group of friends, sisters implied, kind of. Yeah, it's implied they're like sisters.
Well, it's implied that Lori and Brett McKillop's character are sisters. Like,
No, Brett McKillop's the from the previous segment.
Oh yeah, she is. Sorry. That Lori and I'm blanking on her name.
The blonde
The blonde
one dressed
are
as Bo Peep, basically.
Cinderella.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, Cinderella and Red Riding Hood are sisters. They address that.
They're all dressed in a fairy tale motif that year.
And the other two are like friends.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A lot of nice ramping foreshadowing that just sort of escalates.
And, Principal Wilkins shows back up in this segment. We learn that he is not chilled on the murder that night and has been going around in a mask murdering other unsuspecting women throughout the night.
As a vampire.
As a vampire.
Yeah, with like prosthetic teeth that he's like biting into people's necks and like basically just letting them die of blood loss from.
And he's also making it look like they were like passed out drunk.
He is fucked up.
Yeah. And during this, he's stalking the girl dressed as Red Riding Hood.
Mm-hmm.
And it, it's the classic setup. I mean, a girl is dressed as Red Riding Hood going through the woods. You're like, oh, I know where this is going to go.
And they also, throughout the film, they also bring up that the girl dressed as Riding Hood, her name is Lori, that she's a virgin, she's never done this before, but they don't exactly say what it is, and they mean that she's never, like, eaten a guy before.
Yeah, because the
like,
big reveal, which was also implied in another segment with the previous segment, because when they're, like, waiting for the lift to come back up, you hear the howls. And Rhonda straight up says, werewolves.
Yeah.
One could argue there's some interesting visual symbolism and flipping going on with all the blood. And she says it's her first time. And there's some layers to that.
Yeah.
Kind of like how Alien flipped the idea of sexual power.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
And, it's like heavily, the implication
It's not text.
Yeah,
it's subtext.
it's
subtext.
you get what what you're picking up what we're putting
put
there.
down.
And I'd like you to just think of that, viewers, because we'd like to be monetized.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a great segment, and once again, I love those werewolf effects. They're so good. It's kind of like if the Howling met Ginger snaps.
Yeah. Oh, almost dropped it. That would have been terrible.
No, you're good.
Okay.
I trust you.
Okay. So, as for the next segment, I'm waiting for Daulton to bring up on his phone. He's just doing something right now.
Yeah. No, and then our final big segment, the wraparound to.
My second favorite, honestly.
Yeah, it's really good. It's probably the most iconic, actually, in the film. I would argue, even like it's tied with School Bus Massacre for the iconic segments, which of course it's just Meet Sam.
Meet Sam. It's you finally get to see what Sam looks like under the hood, under this little burlap sack he wears. And you get to see what he does, because as we mentioned before, he only appears to those he wants people to see him. Like he only appears to those he wants.
Very selective.
He's very selective. And you see him go to Mr. Krieg's house. Mr. Krieg is revealed to be the bus driver at the end of the segment. And basically just cause mayhem around the house and make him think that either he's going crazy or just make him realize the error of his ways and how he should be respecting the rules of Halloween as well.
And the kids.
And also the kids.
Because he is very much your typical grumpy, get off my lawn type.
The old curmudgeon type.
Like if Gran Torino were actually endearing. That one was for you, D.
But yeah, he goes into the house, Sam does, and he goes basically causing mayhem, making him think that there's someone in the house or like some kids broke in or something like that. And when Mr. Krieg grabs the shotgun and goes upstairs, he takes a razor blade from a candy bar and just like slashes his Achilles.
It's gooey. I love it.
It's pretty nasty, to be honest. And while he's like fumbling around, he falls down the stairs where there's nothing but like broken glass and candy and razor blades and stuff. And it just makes Mr. Krieg's life even worse. I mean, well deserved, but you see him basically fighting off with Sam, like blasting shots into him. And Sam eventually rises, like gets his mask back on and gets the and like puts his hand that got blown off back onto his body. And then he just like gets the candy and leaves, kind of.
Love the tone of that whole sequence. It's very reminiscent of early Peter Jackson movies, or again, Evil Dead.
Yeah, not only that, but you could argue it's like a take on like, you know, your home invasion horror films.
Yeah.
Yeah. Your Black Christmases, your Don't Look Now, that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Your
The Strangers.
When a Stranger Calls. That's what it is.
Yeah.
But it's got a supernatural twist that I think adds way more flavor to it.
Oh, it does. It
And
totally does.
I love what they do with the sack and how that slash in his burlap sack mask becomes like a little mouth hole.
Yeah, and he just bites the candy and leaves.
Yeah.
And of course, we forgot to mention too, the first outright pretty much confirmation that Sam is supernatural was in the School Bus Massacre segment, because he's shown to just be standing on the side of the road back in the flashback part of the film.
Yeah.
Like, that is how you do your omnipresent Greek chorus sort of character.
Yeah.
Sam's great. It's amazing how much characterization goes on for this silent little boy.
Yeah, a character with literally no lines.
Yeah, he just wants you to respect and obey the rules of Halloween. It's that simple.
Doesn't mean it'll save you, though, as is the case with our dear revealed bus driver.
Yeah, he may have appeased Sam, but he did not appease the spirits.
He's not a piece of spirits who came back to get him.
Great payoff, honestly.
Yeah.
I was cheering.
Oh, of course. Why wouldn't you be?
Yeah.
But yeah, I think this is a good place to get out of spoilers.
Yeah, and just wrap her up.
Wrap her up. I love Trick or Treat. You guys
105. 105. We are out of spoilers at 105.
Yeah. I love Trick or Treat. You guys have amazing taste, and I wish I had seen this movie. But then again, this was the best sort of reveal I could have had for this movie, so thank you both. And thank you, Erin, for making this your pick.
You're very welcome. This is a Halloween tradition movie for me at this point. It's like this and Rocky Horror.
Yeah.
This will gladly join my Halloween tradition list, along with Creepshow, From Dusk Till Dawn, fun killer, and Near Dark.
All right, so we all had fun with this one. If you want to watch it, I noticed it's streaming on some of the weird, obscure streaming services like Fubo and Philo. But honestly, just buy a copy.
They have weird names.
Yeah,
They do.
just buy a copy. This movie's used to only be available on DVD. There's readily available DVDs, Blu-rays still floating out there for reasonable prices. The Shout Factory Blu-ray is the one I recommend buying. It's got the most features and doesn't have the spoiler cover of this original Blu-ray release, which just gives away
What Sam looks like.
what Sam
under
looks
the
like
sack.
under the mask. Get either the old DVD, which has the original cover poster art, which I love, by the way,
I hate
Or
that
the Shout
cover.
Fac-
or the Shout Factory.
Yeah,
Blu-ray.
that cover sucks.
It does.
It does.
How much better would that ending have been?
It's just a bad render, too.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, it is.
It's just a cheap render.
It looks stupid.
It does.
It does.
He looks stoned.
It does.
Looks like he had way too much of that reefer.
And then too much of the Zaha.
Anyway,
So, I'm going to be bringing us on home for spooky season.
next week,
Appropriately, yes, next week. So,
I'm excited for that.
I'm really excited for this one. We've covered quite a few foreign films. However, we haven't done a straight up Japanese horror film. And we're going to be covering arguably the biggest cult classic Japanese horror film to come out of the last while, because this film was not available in America for almost 30 years. It released in Japan in 1977 after a tumultuous 2-year period where it wasn't even sure if this film was actually going to get made because it was so weird that the studio didn't want, was like, do you want to direct it? No. Do you want to direct it? No. Do you want to direct it? No. And when you hear that it was supposed to be, to make cash off of, how big Jaws did, it makes even less sense.
Okay.
Especially given the tone of the film. We are going to be looking at the psychedelic, weird, almost, not even almost, deliberately childlike, abstract, surreal Japanese horror film, House.